Welcome to a very special edition of our series on Clever, Cool, Crazy, because on this one, we're going to see Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer. So, I had the pleasure of attending a great convention called Concoction this year in 2026, and finally had the opportunity to play with Professor Dungeon Master himself. Dan ran us through the OG version of Deathbringer based off the classic Trifold, but using the Shadow Dark RPG chassis. It was a great time. If you've ever seen Professor Dungeon Master run a game, I had the pleasure of observing from the sidelines some of his work at past conventions like the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, another great convention. He brings an energy and excitement, makes calls very efficiently, quickly, and keeps it fast and furious. It is a breathtaking experience. We got to play with the death dice. Very fortunate as a member of his Patreon, I was bequeathed my very own bespoke Deathbringer mini, and we were able to really get a chance to experience what that Deathbringer energy is. All of us who played at the um, table that day. Well, now as you know, there is a backer kit as of the time of this recording that has exceeded 1 million, and we're going to see just an incredibly elaborated, full uh, role playing game system based off of the Deathbringer philosophy, and I'm very excited about that. But before we do, and a little bit in homage to Deathbringer of the past to usher in Deathbringer of the future, I wanted to see how well the classic trifold Deathbringer that was designed to be able to be ported over mostly to D20 systems, OSR, but also Dungeons and Dragons, how well we could port it over to Clever, Cool, Crazy. So let me change our lovely audio visuals. Goodbye, Professor. Goodbye, Deathbringer. No! I also have learned that Professor does a much better Deathbringer voice than I do. And let's get up. Okay, I can hit buttons. There we go. And we'll bring up here a document that I prepared a little bit ahead of time to kind of go over some of the things with Deathbringer based off the classic Trifold. Consider this just a little sneak preview for what you all can expect once the full game releases. Now, the question that I posed to myself was, well, what would it look like if we gave Clever, Cool, Crazy the original Deathbringer treatment? So, if any of you are not familiar, Deathbringer is really based off of the classic uh, Dungeons and Dragons formula in terms of ability scores and using a 20-sided dice. And Clever, Cool, Crazy, although certainly, I grew up playing BX, then Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first edition, and finally, when my kids got to be teens, flipped over to fifth edition. Now I've been running Shadow Dark, so I've got a lot of experience with D20 Dungeons and Dragons. But Clever, Cool, Crazy, the game that we've been developing, is using six-sided dice and some different concepts, more feature-based rather than class, ability score, and in modern parlance, proficiency-based. So it'll be interesting to see how this overlay, which was designed with D20 systems in mind, will mesh or interface with what we've been developing with Clever, Cool, Crazy. So, just to get everyone on the same page, Deathbringer uses the classic 6 ability scores of Dungeons and Dragons, and the version of the Trifold that I have would allow you to have 8 build points that can be distributed among them. But no one ability, according to that document, can be higher than a 6 at start, and could go no higher than 10, and the lowest that it could be is a 0. Now, you might ask, well, Glenn, that doesn't sound a lot like the 3 to 18 or 3 to 20 range that I'm used to seeing in old school or modern Dungeons and Dragons. And that's true. What he's done here, and it's what a lot of games have done, is he's basically taken and gone straight for the modifiers that you would add to rolls rather than the straight up full score. Now, I did see in some of the initial things online that looks like the new uh, Deathbringer, after the Backerkit finishes, is going to be using 3d6 down the line. You get rid of the score, you just keep the modifier, which I think is a great addition. But here, he was really going for it. And I loved that he actually went from 0 to 10. So this actually is very helpful because most features, assets, and later on we'll talk conditions in Clever Cool Crazy, at least on human scale, and I would argue that Deathbringer is a very human scale sort of epic, um, are on a scale of 1 to 9. Technically 0 if you have no ability in there and can't use it. But that is very close to this 0 to 10. So it's, I think, going to fit pretty well without us having to do a lot of uh, adjusting scales. So what I suggested was that, if you use these sort of things, someone who was trying to min max would be like a 6-2 with 4 zeros. If they were trying to be a little bit more raising half their scores as high as possible while keeping the other 3 low, a 3-3-2 and 3 zeros. And if they wanted more of that jack of all trades field, like 2 2s and 1s through the rest. So in Clever Cool Crazy, we don't use ability scores, we use features. So to me, what I thought of is, how do I transition here? Well, in Clever Cool Crazy, there is at least one feature that is usually recommended that has more to do with your physicality, and that's your nature. So, but there's others that, like your nurture, may have some of those abilities rolled in, and even who you are, your personal uh, sort of je ne sais quoi, which would be part, along with your reputation, of your name. So, what I thought, and this is something I have thought for a while, and in fact was part of how I did my conversion of the classic BX B2 module Keep on the Borderlands to Clever Cool Crazy for the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo in 2026. Uh, Basically, if you have a couple ability scores that are important, that are higher level, you could use a qualitative part of the descriptor of the feature to represent that. And that would be things such as strong, dexterous, hardy, wise, intelligent, charismatic. So if we were trying to get that flavor of the ability array, but in more clever, cool, crazy mechanics, what that suggests to me is we really want to have things that are more, probably no more than level 3. That's where you're just starting to actually be survivable. I shouldn't say survivable, but a little bit more proficient in abilities, and looking at the spread using the point buy for the trifold. To me, if you had two features that were, like, let's say someone who was strong and dexterous, they could be strong 3, dexterous 3, or they could have a number of these represented, like hearty, wise, and intelligence could be 3, 2, 1. and those would be each the feature level. So that's how I would initially think to convert that part of uh, the way they use these ability scores in the actual Deathbringer Trifold. Now, the heart of Deathbringer is the Deathbringer dice. They're cool dice. They've got like skulls on them, on the faces. I'm very looking forward as a backer to getting my Deathbringer dice. Um, they actually are stated to be the replacement for class features, skills, feats, and inspiration, and that you're supposed to begin each session with death dice equal to your level, that being your class level, of course. Now, or character level, if you will. Now, here's the easy thing. Clever, Cool, Crazy doesn't use class features, skills, feats, or inspiration, so we don't need to worry about having to um, throw those out. But what would Deathbringer dice actually be doing in Clever, Cool, Crazy? Well, let's think about it. They That's a typo. They can be spent to add to your roll in Deathbringer. They can be used to inflict additional damage or reduce damage. And that to me sounds like Clever, Cool, Crazy's effort. So in Clever, Cool, Crazy, we don't have hit points. You've got your features and sometimes assets, and you've got your conditions, which you could start out with a condition if you're unfortunate. We'll get to that. Or you could gain them through battle or other things. And if your conditions start to rival your features or assets, that's where you are getting to the point that death is on the table. And yes, for those of you who might initially look at the outlook layout of Clever, Cool, Crazy and think, oh, well, it's more a narrative game. I'm sure no one dies. We protagonists have died in Clever, Cool, Crazy, and they will continue to do so. You want to have some stakes in the game, right? So death is definitely a possibility in Clever, Cool, Crazy. But much like what I've heard Professor Dungeon Master talk about in his um, philosophy of the games, for our game of Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer, we don't want death to be meaningless or lacking drama, at least. And of course, there are good mechanics in Clever, Cool, Crazy, or Embrace Death One or Defy Death, to really make sure that death is something that is meaningful and exciting. I actually love what I hear for the Backerkit information about ideas that death will actually be a way in Deathbringer to come back with interesting features, both strengths and scars, if you will. So I look forward to seeing that full instantiation. But that was not really in the trifold, so let's stick with what we've got. So, going back to Clever, Cool, Crazy's effort, effort is something that is really a buffer in some ways. So if you do have a condition, you can spend effort to add to your rolls, which could counteract the condition for that. It doesn't take your condition away. It actually a little bit reminds me of like fixing up a wound in Peter's Tales from Elsewhere system. But at least for that role, you can spend effort to basically counteract a condition, or if you want to spend even more, it will make you more effective. And if Clever, Cool, Crazy, how your role comes out against your antagonist or resistance, that both has defensive and potentially damage inflicting ramifications. So the more effort you spend, the more likely you are to defend, the more likely you are to prevail and to do damage. So to me, effort really lines up more closely with the Deathbringer dice. So for this version of Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer, we're going to reflavor effort. It's now called Deathbringing. And you can get at the start of the session Deathbringing equal to the level of your highest feature. And that is actually a feature that was built into Clever Cool Crazy from the beginning. That one option for determining starting effort is making it equal to the level of your highest feature. And I think that resonates fairly well with what the Trifold Deathbringer says about gaining Deathbringer dice equal to your level. Now, if we're putting things as high as level 3 to start with, that's being a little bit generous, but we don't have to do that. If people wanted to go more uh, grim and struggling in the start, they could cap feature levels at 2, which is very reasonable. Technically, you could have them say, yeah, your features are all 1 to start with. You're going to have to earn it the hard way. Um, so you have that latitude as a revealer of worlds to set what the most amount you can spend on any feature is. And if you want to mostly resemble how many dice you get at the beginning of a session in Deathbringer, set all your features to 1. If you want, however, to be more reflecting some of those ability scores by having them a little higher, then you'll get a few more Deathbringer dice. But since we don't have hit points at all, really, maybe having a little more Deathbringing is not the end of the world for Clever Cool Crazy. So, I loved the backgrounds and the random miseries that Professor Dungeon Master had on the Trifold. They were flavorful. I mean, it's basically, I think, like a D20 roll table that gives just one-liners that really give a lot of flavor to the world for very little real estate on the Trifold. So what we can do is use that. They have a roll table for a background, which guess what? Clever, cool, crazy. We've got backgrounds. They're called your nurture feature. And he has a random misery. And in Clever, Cool, Crazy, that's an enduring condition, which indeed is an option to have at character creation. So I think that fits nice. So every Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer gets a nurture feature, and you can have them choose from the ones on the trifold, you know, or you could make them roll for it. That's another option. Similarly for the random misery, it was especially my random misery in the session with Professor Dungeon Master that I found the most flavorful. I had the random misery of amnesia, which actually went very nicely because I had decided once I got that, yep, I'm going to be a plague doctor. I'm going to be Dr. Amnesia, which lines up well because for those of you who've been following, my day job is as a behavioral neurologist and I work in dementia care. So the irony of playing a amnestic doctor in the game just too good to pass up once I rolled that random amnesia. And as some of you who have followed here know, we do have a fundraiser we do for the Alzheimer's Association's Do What You Love to End All's um, our RPGs versus AD fundraisers that we've played a fair amount of Clever, Cool, Crazy with, and we will continue those sessions going forward. Who knows? Maybe someone will choose to do a Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer session, or maybe once we see what gets released as the Backerkit ends, maybe someone will go full Deathbringer, the full RPG. You never know, at least in the beta. Okay, back to our Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer. Now, in Clever, Cool, Crazy, most character classes, those are going to be your niche features. So very simple, right? You can choose, and the ones that were available on the Trifold, they are having an expanded one for the Backerkit, were Deathbringer, Grimscribe, Scoundrel, Witch Hunter, and Plague Doctor. So that's in your world what you could have your protagonists choose. They could be a Deathbringer, they could have a Grimscribe niche, whichever of these they want. Okay. Now, when we look at the trifold version of these classes, there's a few features. It's interesting. I will say, it says that Deathbringer dice replace class features, but then we have classes that have features, but they're pretty succinct, so I think that's okay. We can capture some of the flavor. And some of the ideas I had for this was first, for those who have a niche feature of Deathbringer, they could also have an additional feature, hard to kill. So, following the rule of two, as you know, you take you take the highest level of any two features used, and or any of the up to two assets that you can use, and that'll be your base. But then you still get bonuses +1 to add on top of that for any of the additional features or assets left over. And also, we're going to give Deathbringers the starting asset of light armor 1, okay, because that's what they get in the Trifold. So, thinking about this, a Deathbringer who gets into a battle can use their Deathbringer, whatever level that feature's at. Let's say it's level 2, we'll be generous. And if they have their hard to kill feature 1 and asset light armor 1, they can add both of those to their level 2. So they're already at 4 and I'm going to give a sneak preview here. We changed some of the nomenclature. The pre-roll total is now named capability. So their capability is 4 before even rolling so far, or adding effort, which is now death bringing, or bringing it down if they have one or more conditions. Now remember, in the Deathbringer Trifold, everyone's going to get an enduring condition. But let's say, for example, let's say we had a Deathbringer, but they had rolled or chosen amnesia. Well, amnesia is not going to come into effect during battle, so it would not apply as a condition in a clever, cool, crazy death-bringing battle. And they could, of course, add their death-bringing to whatever attack they're making, and that would bring up their capability, again, the the part of the game formerly known as pre-roll total, to a 5, 6, or who knows how much. All right. So what about the other classes on the Trifold? Well, let's talk about Grimscribes. They are stated that they can't use armor assets and gain the condition spell tattooed. In the lore of Deathbringer, basically magic users get their spells tattooed on their body, and since they probably ended the world, they're not very popular. So those spell tattoos can get them in a lot of trouble. So I think that a great way to represent that is they get an additional condition of spell tattooed. They can't use armor assets. Now, one might wonder, well, Glenn, is this where we have to summon up metaphysics, which is a rule in Clever Cool Crazy, which basically allows you to add whatever rules you need to create the genre or setting that you want to in the Clever Cool Crazy RPG. But, and this is some newer sort of terms that I've been developing. The other thing, remember, is that the features are also governed by their qualitative descriptors. A Grimscribe in the lore of Deathbringer can't use armor. So, if we follow that lore, then narratively, a Grimscribe can't use an armor asset. They would not be granted one. If they had one, they couldn't use it as armor. Now, maybe they could sell it. That's a different story. But they couldn't use it in combat because that's part of the lore of the Deathbringer universe. And in general, in Clever, Cool, Crazy, usually you either rely on real world sort of tropes or genre tropes to inform what those qualitative descriptors can or can't do in the Clever, Cool, Crazy game. it's very nice to say, yes, I am a acrobatic harlequin, but that does not actually give you the ability to fly. Um, similarly, you can say I'm a grim scribe, which means in the world of Deathbringer, you can, using their lore, you can cast spells as long as they're tattooed on you, but you can't don armor and use it. So basically, I would use that lore feature of, I shouldn't use the term feature because we use it for other things, clever, cool, crazy, but that lore aspect of the game to limit that without having to go hard into a specific mechanical rule using metaphysics. So that, is something that, some might consider. But again, the guideline for revealers of worlds or rows is that if you can do it with the base rules, try not to do it with metaphysics. Only when all else fails do you have the metaphysics as your backup, or if you really just want to. Anyway, um, we are giving, though, Grim Scribes, even though they can't use armor assets, they're getting a lot of assets. They get 4 cantrip assets and 2 spell features to start with. And the reason I kind of did the cantrips as assets is that um, they're not really expected to level up. So you assets don't gain experience in Clever Cool Crazy. So keeping them as assets keep them kind of capped. Um, the spell features, on the other hand, can grow with your Grim Scribe. So that's why I had those listed as spell features. Now, scoundrels. How do we represent scoundrels in the Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer? Well, we're going to give them, in addition to the scoundrel niche feature, the features of thieving and backstabber. So sometimes you're going to use your scoundrel feature in combination with your thieving feature. If you're doing a theft, maybe doing some second story work, but if you're trying to lurk in the shadows and backstab someone, you're going to use your backstabber and your scoundrel together. Um, you know, there may be some opportunities where you're thieving and backstabbing without being a scoundrel, but I'll have to hear that story. And they are ones who can use light armor, but they can only use light armor, right? So again, we're going to use the lore of scoundrels in Deathbringer to narratively keep them from using other types of armor assets, but light armor is allowed. So if you had a scoundrel who was in a fight for their life, the asset of light armor could help protect them during the roll. Their backstabber, if they were positioned right to attack from behind, could be used to be more effective in the battle. But if they are challenged to a face-to-face duel out in the light of day, I don't know that they're going to be able to use that backstabber. Keep to the shadows, you scoundrels. What about a witch hunter? Well, witch hunters, they can use their witch hunter feature to turn undead. Again, do they need a special power for that? No. This is part of the lore of Deathbringer that witch hunters turn undead. Just like just like when we did the conversion of B2 Keep on the Borderlands from BX to Clever Cool Crazy, if someone had the feature Cleric, they could use their feature to make an action roll to turn the undead because they're clerics. They didn't need to have a specific listing for that. It's part of the lore of being a cleric. And in Deathbringer, it is part of the lore that witch hunters can turn the undead. They also get some assets. Now, here's an interesting one, right? Detect Evil, I made as an asset, but it's only 1 use per session. And Protection from Evil, it's 1 use per session. So not as powerful as having a full-blown spell tattooed upon them, but they have some assets to lean on. They also can use the light armor asset, but only light armor. Again, we're going to use lore to cap that off. Oh, what about Plague Doctors? That was a really fun class to play. Very flavorful, and had some interesting dice rolls that made it a great experience. They are all about making assets. Okay, this is an interesting one because you can make ephemeral or short-term assets in Clever Cool Crazy without spending a lot of experience. Um, and that's what we allow plague doctors to do here. Now, again, they have some mostly assets. Cure wounds and cure disease, 1 use per session assets. Cure poison, 1 use per session asset. I'm sorry. Cure wounds, I should have said 1 use per patient per session. And I will point out, in Clever Cool Crazy, assets can have in parentheses limits or modifiers to how those assets are used, either increasing or decreasing over time or with other triggers. So this is still very in keeping with the structure of Clever Cool Crazy. They do get leather armor at start, but can't use any other armor. So that we again are going to leverage our lore for that. They also get potions they can make. So I listed every potion they can make. Uh, I gave them the renewable um, parentheses. So basically, they can make it. They make 1 use. They're going to have to make or recharge a potion by taking a successful action using their Plague Doctor niche feature. So that sort of is to parallel how they would roll to get a new potion every day. I did some of the math on how many potions they got, how to kind of make it so it's roughly equivalent. It's a little different than how the um, Trifold usually has plague doctors, but I think overall it's has a similar spread in the amount of potions you would have available during a session, and I think that's the big point here. All right, so they have hit dice, not many. Clever, cool, crazy, we don't. So how are we dealing with the hit dice? Interesting enough, they vary in size from D6 to D10. 6-sided dice through 10-sided dice. Very Dungeons and Dragons of them. At least, once you get beyond basics, the very earliest Dungeons and Dragons, everyone got a D6 for hit dice. But pretty quickly, it had variety built into the hit dice. So, what I thought was for those classes that get a higher D face, if what we could do is give them a feature to represent that, called maybe called toughness. You could flavor it qualitatively to go better with the you know flavor of their class, like maybe the scoundrel is a cockroach 1 or 2, for example, if they had extra hit dice, but I don't think they actually have that high. But again, we could do an extra toughness feature that could represent that part of the hit dice difference between classes. Now, in the Trifold, they give very simple, but I think rather elegant levels for smaller, medium, and larger weapons. They changed the size of the dice based off of that. Very reasonable way to go. Again, though, we don't necessarily use mundane weapons as assets in Clever, Cool, Crazy, but you can use special weapons as assets. So just to give more of that differentiation and Deathbringer flavor, what we could do is say if your uh, protagonist in Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer would have a D8 weapon, you could instead make that a level 1 asset. And if they'd have a D10 weapon, you could make that a level 2 asset. So a level 2 asset, if we went really hardcore and had them start with level 1 features, that would make a big difference for them. And actually, that could serve as their base in battle. Not going to help them much if they have to jump a pit, however. In fact, it might even work against them as a condition. That's another fun part of Clever, Cool, Crazy. Sometimes your features or assets can work against you if it makes sense in the narrative, almost as if they were conditions. And sometimes your conditions can help you out as if they were assets. But usually they follow the rules. So, if we look at the improvement in the Deathbringer Trifold, basically they get 1 to 4 experience points per session. They level up at 10 XP. This actually is pretty similar to the amount we do it by decimal points, but it's still the same concept that we see people leveling up in Clever, Cool, Crazy. Depending on where we set the initial effort and the session experience rate, by the end of the session, you may have again, we can set it to be equivalent to anywhere from 1 to 4 experience points. If you want it to make it close, as I said here, for a low session experience rate, you could gain 0.1 for the first time you use a feature, another 0.1 for learning the hard way, and 0.1 for each death bringing turned in during a montage or at end of session. Now, big feature of Deathbringer, and this is harkening back to the old school way of earning experience points. They have that you get 1 experience point for every 100 gold pieces. I think what we would do is say in Clever, Cool, Crazy that whenever the party acquires in the session a number of gold pieces equal to the number of protagonists times 100, that would be the signal for the Revealer of Worlds to award Awesome, which means they each get 1 Deathbringer, which can be turned into 1 XP. Remember, we're saying that effort is now called Deathbringing, right? So I should say Deathbringer here is bringing instead of bringer. There we go. And I think that nicely captures the spirit of a party venturing forth for gold. And but I made it so it's equal to the number of protagonists time 100 being the trigger, because in Clever, Cool, Crazy, really we expect things like awesome or effort rewards for important achievements, milestones to be given to the entire group of protagonists. So that's why I've got it multiplied that way. Actually makes it harder for them to hit the threshold because they have to do it for everyone, unless some of them die before that. But it also means that everyone is going to want to work real hard to hit that target. So, what about spell failure? Well, the nice thing is we already have in Clever, Cool, Crazy that spell casting is by an action roll, and that failure has consequences, usually conditions, and conditions work very well with spell failure. Here, what I did was I took their scale, which was based off a d20 roll. Well, we just use how bad you failed on your dueling exploding dice system roll and an action roll. And if you failed by less than 5, you just fail. Congratulations. If you fail by 5 or more, you gain or increase your corruption condition. If it's 5 to 9, you get that fizzle. If it's 10 to 14, you get that backfire. If it's 15 to 19, which you remember, we have an exploding dice on the other side against you. So the higher they explode, you could get to these numbers 15 to 19 disaster. And of course, 20 or worse is a catastrophe. And you gain the destruction condition by exploding in a shower of gore. Usually we've got some dials in Clever, Cool, Crazy to try and help you avoid death and destruction conditions. But it is appropriate that if you're facing a severe penalty, that it could happen. And that's what happens in this Clever, Cool, Crazy version, Deathbringer. So, kill shots, again, very similar. We can map that onto your action roll. If you succeed by less than 5 in inflicting enough of a condition upon your enemies that they will die, it's an agonizing death. If you're 5 to 9, it's a clean kill. 10 to 14, a brutal doom. 15 to 20, because you can 15 to 19, splatter and gore, and 20 or better, it's a Deathbringer result. And because a lot of our tiers of mounting successes are by 5s, this actually works pretty well with the actual uh, tiers on the D20 that are used. So, what about combat? Well, combat in Clever, Cool, Crazy, we abstract time and space. We know initiative. Uh, Now, interesting enough, Deathbringer goes in the 6-second round with group initiative, and players take turn clockwise from the game master, which in Clever, Cool, Crazy is called the Revealer of Worlds. But much like Clever, Cool, Crazy, everyone declares their actions, including spells, before resolving, which is actually what we do in Clever, Cool, Crazy. The attack prior to spell casting can make spells fail. We're going to just collapse that into the resolution. Remember, in Clever, Cool, Crazy, whenever you do something, the world pushes back, and whenever the world tries to do something to you, you have a chance to push back. So really, we're just going to collapse that in, because whether you do better or the world does better or your opponents do better will affect that, and we don't have to worry about timing of attack. Now, it's interesting that in the Trifold it says describing stunts is adjudicated by Game Master as to whether it gives advantage or has disadvantage. Well, guess what? We in Clever, Cool, Crazy have situation rules that capture a lot of the spirit of Deathbringer, even if they're different. So when you are describing your stunts, really you're telling me your approach in the terminology of Clever, Cool, Crazy. And if you describe a clever approach, you're going to get a additional die, which is similar in spirit to advantage. If you're doing it very cool, and I got to tell you, I think having played with Professor Dungeon Master, he's looking for those heroic moments. So really, if you're going to award a extra die for being cool in a Clever, Cool, Crazy Deathbringer, it shouldn't just be for giving lines like Conan. It should also be for doing heroic attempts. And of course, what I love a lot, there's a lot of, I think, the spirit in Deathbringer is if you do something out of the box, crazy, like, don't tell me the odds kind of uh, going for the chandelier, jumping over the pit. I keep mentioning jumping over the pit because we had one of our players' character in the game do something epic involving jumping over a pit. Didn't work out so well for them, but they did achieve their goal, and it was cool and it was crazy. I would have given that guy all 3 Clever, Cool, Crazy for that role. We don't have disadvantage. What it though can be represented is by a ephemeral condition. I might state, well, given where you're at and what you're trying to do, that actually is going to work against you. So you're going to have this condition that will go towards your burden, which will then uh, be subtracted from your ability, which is all your features and assets and effort used added up to tell me your capability. So they use hit points of 0 as unconscious. And this is old terminology. You could use that happens when your pre-roll total capability is 0 or less if they accept defeat. So, what does accepting defeat mean? Well, that actually is a narrative as much as mechanical option. So, it's very easy for the row to say, oh, yep, you are 0 or less in your capability. If you accept defeat, you're unconscious. fits in that easily. Now, embracing death and defying death feel very Deathbringer, even if there's no rules in the trifold that mirror that, but we're going to keep those. So, what does it mean to embrace death? Okay, your capability is at 0 or less. And what that means is instead of giving in to defeat, maybe you tried finding another option to get around and get a higher capability, but you just can't. So instead, you say that to get this epic moment successful, I will embrace death, which means that you won't just be unconscious, you're going to die, but you're going to succeed. So, another, again, illustrative example, going back to that Pitman, it made a difference and made an impact on me in that session. If instead of making a very desperate roll and partially failing but partially succeeding, they had actually rolled instead saying, I am going to embrace death, they would have succeeded no matter what. But we knew they were going to die no matter what. So their goal would have been accomplished, and they could have just narrated their death epically. Defying death is a little different. That's where basically you're at 0 or less for your capability, and you still say, you know what? I'm going to try and hang on. I'm going to make this roll. If I succeed, that means I get to go on for a little bit longer. If I fail, I'm dead. So, what about corruption? Well, corruption in Deathbringer is gained when you commit an evil deed, as well as when you have a critical failure in spell casting. And in Clever Cool Crazy, we can easily model corruption, as I previously mentioned, as a condition that can go, in this case, up to 1 times 10 or 1 M1, magnitude 1, at which point the protagonist cannot overcome their corruption, which is true. Magnitude of that height would be very hard. And they become an antagonist. The Revealer of Worlds takes over. So, these are a few of my ideas for how you could take the OG version of Clever Cool Crazy based off of their trifold. That was basically what all of us were using to play Clever Cool Crazy in the time before this Backerkit, unless they were play testing. But I think we have some great things to look forward to as the Kickstarter moves forward for us. And let me just do this here. And again, I want to thank the people at Concoction for putting on a great, a wonderful convention. I want to thank everyone who played with us at the tables. I was running both Clever Cool Crazy in our starter version, but also ran a lot of Shadow Dark and Down the Dark Stairway. That was a great time. And I really want to thank Professor Dungeon Master. He made sure he stayed as long as it took to make sure everyone who wanted to play Deathbringer with him got a chance. And it was incredible. He brought a lot of energy, a lot of humor. And it was a great experience that I will treasure. And thank you, Professor Dungeon Master. And congratulations again on the successful launch of your Backerkit, and I think it's going to be great, and I look forward to seeing the finished product. And with that, I will let everyone go, and thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all will try out Deathbringer. Remember, the Backerkit at the time of this recording is still ongoing, so get in on it. And I have received no products for this. I have no affiliations. I just thought it was cool. And please do like and subscribe to the channel here. Keep in touch for updates on the Clever Cool Crazy RPG and for our fundraising for RPGs versus AD, which goes to the Alzheimer's Association in the fight against Alzheimer's disease and related disorders. And may all your rolls be 20s. Or in the case of Clever Cool Crazy Deathbringer, 5s and 5s and 5s again.